posterity, thank you for coming. I'm going to be talking about the NeuroScience of Spirit. And as a neuropsychologist, I'm a little bit of an outlier in that a lot of neuropsychologists wouldn't be talking about spiritual things, but I was educated on a parallel track. I went to Bible school from the first grade all the way through a master's degree. And so I got Bible, science, every day. And I didn't see a conflict like others may see. I saw a complementarity. I saw that there's a reason that we separate the two, but there's also a non-separation because we're whole beings. And when we look at the brain, we see from neuroscience that there's a left brain and a right brain. The left brain is where scientists like to go. It's the reductionistic, materialistic, mechanistic, analytic part of the self. And everybody's got one of those. You can't have it. Can't be a human without that because you're constantly looking at differentiating things, breaking them apart, and tearing them down to understand them. But there's a right brain that looks at things in terms of the whole. It doesn't look at the parts, it looks at the big picture. You're literally right now flipping back and forth between your left brain and right brain all the time and seeing things both as a whole and as lots of parts. And the spiritual sense is the sense of wholeness, the sense of connection, the sense of the meaning, the sense of everything fitting together. So there's no dichotomy, there's no conflict, there's complementarity. And good scientists know that. And good spiritual people know that too. We all know that. And this false dichotomy is just a way to set up an argument so that you can fight over stuff. And I think that's unnecessary most of the time. But as human beings, we do a lot of that. It seems to be our nature. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do. So this is my lovely and talented wife, Leanne. And Leanne and I have been running NeuroSource for 20 years. We've been married for 30. We did it before we formed NeuroSource too. But for the last 20 years, we've been in the same spot, providing brain healing services. So as a neuropsychologist, I can test you and measure things and decide whether there's something that's outside the normal range and then help you heal in some way after an injury or some kind of deficit. But my real passion is peak performance. I want everyone to be able to find what we call flow. We all need to find our balance and our purpose and our meaning and our way to connect with each other, with all humanity, with the earth, and with all time space, and with the quantum field. So there's something going on here in both the spiritual realm and the scientific realm that's actually bringing us together in a way that I find quite exciting. So a typical day for me might involve measuring someone's brain with a quantitative EEG, looking at suboptimal regions of the brain, and then helping that person optimize their brain with training, biofeedback training, and stimulation, like electrical stimulation, magnetic stimulation, and at the same time measuring the quantitative or objective part, we measure the subjective part. So that's the N of one science. N of one science is when there's only one subject and it's you, and there's only one principal investigator and it's you, And I just happen to be a co-investigator with some fun toys and tools that can help you with your subjective science. So subjective science is spirituality. You are an N of one, no matter who you are. You are unique in the universe. You are unique in all space and time. Objective science puts everybody in these classifications and measures you against everybody else, which can be helpful, but it's not the uniqueness that is supported so much as the sameness. So they're complementary. The objective science, where you study groups and statistical averages, and the subjective science that looks at the uniqueness of every individual. Leanne also does this kind of work. She uses electromagnetic stimulation on the body. She uses massage on the body. She uses epigenetic coaching and measurement and counseling. So, because your genes are unique. There's only one person with your genes, unless you have an identical twin. And when you look at the genes, you're actually looking at the end product of a process, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. We're electromagnetic beings. Each of us has a field of energy that we're generating and that overlaps with the other people around us. If we had instruments that could measure it sensitively enough, we could feel the energy in this room and we could quantify it. And if we all went into a meditative state, the energy in this room would go up and we would share that energy, and it would help us feel a connection in a physical, real sense. It's not woo-woo, it's science. We measure that. And we also are sensitive to it. We have senses. We have eyes and ears and smell and sight and touch, but we have interoceptive sensitivities. We can feel each other in ways that science can't measure very well yet, but we know it's all there because we have ways to look at interoception and measurements of that type and the electromagnetic field. We just know it's there. We can measure it. And you could probably go out and take a picture of it in some of the booths out there today. So there's not a dichotomy. There's left brain and right brain, analytic and holistic, reductionistic and holistic. Either or is the left, both and is the right. But it comes together now in quantum physics. Even Einstein said that all matter and all space and time depend upon the field, the singularity, the field in which space and time all exist at the same time. And all matter, all past, and all futures exist at the same time. It's called the eternal now. And that's where we live. Most of us spend most of our consciousness repeating the past because we've been programmed for how many decades to think that what I'm seeing now is probably the same thing I saw yesterday and the day before and the day before. And we lose our ability sometimes because we become habituated and we run on automatic. And they say that 95% of what you're thinking right now is the same thing you've been thinking for the last X number of years. But wouldn't it be lovely if we could join together and be more creative and spontaneous, stop killing each other, stop harming each other, and learn to cooperate? That would be a spiritual experience when we feel the connection. And understanding quantum physics is one of the ways that's helping us do that. You don't have to know math and calculus and all that kind of stuff because you can feel it. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is that we feel in terms of the quantum field. One of the most important facts, this is a known fact accepted by everyone, every physics lab on the face of the earth, it's called the observer effect. You've probably heard of it. When you look reductionistically at matter everywhere. You see that it is either a particle or a wave. It's either located in space and time or distributed throughout all space and time. And it depends on the observer. If you look at it and look for a particle, you'll see a particle. If you look at it and for a wave, you'll see a wave. So it's not just an individual effect. It's also a community effect, networks of coherent observers cooperate to collapse the wave function into reality. And so we have consensus reality. Most of us can look around us and say, well, that's a chair, that's a wall, that's a ceiling, those are lights. And we agree because we've been taught since birth to identify things in certain ways through association. So we've been programmed. And that's okay. But we've also been programmed in ways that we don't even realize. If you watch a lot of TV, then you're getting programmed by these commercials. They're training you to think that you need this drug, if you have this illness, you're gonna be this way, you're gonna have to have, so there's a lot of programming that I think we need to wake up to and take over and take charge of our own programming. And we need to change consensus reality. And it takes a cooperation of networks of coherent observers. We decide, what do you want to see? Do you want to see hatred and pain and suffering and warfare and deprivation and poverty? Or would you like to see love and joy and connection and cooperation and peace? What kind of world do you want? And there's kind of a rising consciousness now, realizing that this isn't just namby-pamby, pie in the sky, wishy-washy stuff. This is real. We can do this. We can put our minds to it and create a new consensus reality. I want to tell you some good news. There's a guy named Nassim Haramein who has unified relativity and quantum physics. That may mean something to you. That was what Einstein was trying to do when he died. He had all his papers and all his research thrown about in his office, and he was still trying to solve this problem. Nassim Haramein took that up and has improved on Einstein's research and quotes Einstein's research that wasn't even published when Einstein was alive to generate what we now call unified physics. That's exciting for a couple of reasons. One is, we understand the universe better, but more importantly, if you know and can calculate what's happening at the quantum level, which he has shown us, he has shown us that there aren't 4 forces in physics, there are only 2. Normally you think about the nuclear strong force, the weak nuclear force, gravity, and electromagnetism. He has summed them up and reduced them down to just gravity, the attractive force, which includes the nuclear weak and the nuclear strong, and electromagnetic frequencies, which is the radiative force. So that's what happens in a black hole. You've got condensed matter that sucks everything in over the event horizon, from beyond which nothing can go. And you've got Hawking radiation at every black hole. Been proven that. The black holes at the center of every galaxy are pulling stuff in like a giant bathtub circling around into the singularity at the core of every galaxy. There's a singularity. But there's also a singularity at the core of every piece of matter. Every proton is a black hole. This is what the new physics is telling us. So space is flowing into and out of every piece of matter. And Nassim Haramein and his scientists have created the ability to extract free energy from space itself. I wear around my neck what's called an ARC crystal. ARC, A-R-K, it stands for Advanced Resonance Kinetics. He has used the science of unified physics to manufacture in a lab a quartz crystal that is solid, doesn't move, no moving parts, but it's actually channeling electrons from space itself. It's constructed based on the shape of space. And we have free energy. I've got free energy hanging around my neck. Experimentally, it has been shown to increase the lifespan of biological life, to make tomatoes that normally shrink up in days last for months compared to the other tomatoes that were in the control group. So it structures the water around it. So that's why wearing it around your neck is good for you. It structures your water, because we're mostly water. But this technology is just the prototype of what he's building out in the International Space Station in Switzerland. Had to move out of the United States, because if you do something with free energy, you disappear. So they moved to Switzerland, and they've got it open source. They're not hiding anything. It's open to everybody, peer reviewed. Every physics lab on Earth is now looking at this and going, whoa, what can we do with this? He says within 20 years, we will be able to wipe out poverty. Free energy, think about it. Free energy. He's also developing gravity drive, which is going to enable us to leave the planet, leave the galaxy with no energy cost. Wow. So we can travel, in case we're, Earth is kind of looking a little shaky. We kind of dumped it, It's like a garbage dump now, so we may have to leave. In 20 years, we'll have the technology. So unified physics is a good news, and it's peer-reviewed, it's open source, nobody's hiding it. Everybody gets a chance. That's what science is. It's not some culture saying, oh, we've got the answer, like religion often does. You're all going to hell or whatever, but we're not. That's kind of what my fundamentalist religious background taught me. It's us and them. You're going to hell, we're not. There was a joke that St. Peter was giving somebody a tour, and they walked beside, the mansions and stuff, and he said, oh, be kind of quiet around them. They think they're the only ones in heaven. So they tiptoed back past that one. But science doesn't do that. It's open to everyone. And that's exciting to me. I think that's the best news I've heard in my lifetime. If we can wipe out poverty, that's a good idea. So each of us is, if you read scripture, you'll hear that we're all created in the image of God. Each of us has the power to create. These are signals of electricity coming from someone's brain. This is someone literally collapsing the wave function from the quantum field in real time. So the electricity in your brain changes into chemicals in your brain. Neuropeptides, which become emotions flowing through your bloodstream, which become the environment around every cell in your body, which plays the keyboard of your DNA and expresses your genetics to become your physical self and your moving, functional self. So from thought to emotion to the expression of genes in the form of proteins, you're creating your reality. What you think, what you feel, and what you do is your personal reality or your personality. So we're creating right here and right now. And if we cooperate in that creation, how far could we go? Could we create a global cooperation, a connectivity of love and joy and peace. Would that be wonderful? Wouldn't it? That's what science can help us do. Whereas religion can be good. I value religion, but it's local. It's usually a local culture with a local language and a local set of meanings that is in conflict with another local culture and a local language and a local set of meanings. So they're fine for local, but religions, there's not anything that's global. Unless you're really seeking the truth, then you'll give up the old traditions that hold you back, and you'll go for the truth wherever you find it. And I think you're going to need to realize that science is giving us a new language of mysticism. So the mystic is someone who goes around knowing that they're connected to everything, that they're one with the universe, and they experience the love and the joy and the peace and the hope and the growth of the evolution of being connected. That's the mystic. Science tells us how that happens. It's quantum physics. And you don't have to know math because you already have the entire ability to create from nothing whatever you want to create. So the electrical activity is the cognition or thinking. The chemical activity is where that electricity changes into neuropeptides and molecules of emotion that flow through the body, which then in turn causes the proteins through genetic expression to make matter. And we become that, starting with our thinking. So much of our thinking is unconscious though. We inherit so much of it. We're humans, so we've got a lot that has been happening before we were even born. But it's important to realize that we live in a world of stress. And so most of our hormones flowing through our bodies are stress hormones. And they push away and push out the other set of hormones, which are the hormones of health and healing and growth and creativity. So if you're not conscious of that, you'll just go the default and live in a world of stress, and your stress hormones will literally play the keyboard of disease on your genes, and you will become sick with stress-related diseases. 90 to 95% of the illnesses we have are stress-related. So we've got to figure out how to turn off the stress hormones and turn on the health and healing and growth and creativity hormones that allows us to feel connection and to feel love and wonder and awe and beauty. If you're in stress, you don't see those things. Things are ugly and hard and painful. And eventually, it causes us to have stress-related diseases. So a lot of what we need to do is understand, what can we do about that? So the triune brain is basically what I've been talking about. We've got a cortex that thinks, creates that electricity. Then the limbic system translates it into hormones that flow through the bloodstream and then activate the behaviors in that sequence. One of the breakthroughs was when we discovered that cells have these receptors for these hormones. Candace Pert discovered the receptor sites for opioids. So how many of you are familiar with that term, opioids? How many of you take opioids? You know, most of us probably have at some time because they help with pain. Okay? But every chemical in our bodies has receptors on the cells. And we create those molecules with our thinking. If we want to change our molecules of emotion, we change our thinking. And it's as simple as that, but it's not quite that simple. Most of us have had trauma. It's hard to even be alive on the earth without having trauma. And it gets stored in the body because those emotions become habitual, which play the keyboard of genetic expression, which ends up being the theme of our life. We live out our trauma in our bodies. And so resolving trauma is going to have to be part of our agenda. This is a well-researched principle. I call it the how am I doing principle. But it has to do with the connection between thinking, emotion, and behavior. So there are three kinds of thinking. Rock thinking, which causes poor performance, low emotion like unconcern and apathy. Stinking thinking, which causes high emotion, the kind that makes you perform poorly. Somewhere in the middle is where you get the balance. Your autonomic nervous system seeks balance. You have to have some cortisol, or you can't get out of bed. So you have to get psyched up without getting psyched out. This is actually called the Yerkes-Dodson law. It's a law. Everybody has to obey this law. I teach people how to put this tachometer on their dashboard. You need to know where you are. If your performance is suffering because you're overly emotional, you've got some stinking thinking. And you can figure out what it is by how you feel. And there are cognitive behavioral techniques that help you identify the stinking thinking, replace it with straight thinking, and improve your performance. That's a strict cognitive behavioral approach. Some people, on the other hand, if you've been so traumatized that you're stuck over here and don't know how to get out of it, then you may need something more powerful than just talking. And a lot of us are that way because we have multi-generational accumulation of trauma. And it's hard to get that stuff out. The body does keep the score. So that's part of what I do is I help people find and unwind the trauma so that they can get back to balance, back to flow. See, this is flow. Flow is when you're doing about as good as you can and you're getting a little better and you can feel it and it feels good. Whatever it is you're doing, it feels like you're growing and evolving. And that does not help. That does not happen when you're inundated with stress hormones. It happens when you have DHEA and growth and health and healing hormones flowing. And so how to do that, if you can just do it by changing your thinking, good for you. But there are things that some people need to help get that going because they've had so much trauma. It's not that easy for some people. Now so I call this the first principle of thinking straight. Being aware of your emotional arousal and your performance. How am I doing? If you're doing pretty well, you're thinking pretty straight. If you're overly emotional, you got some stinking thinking. And if you just don't care, then you got some rock thinking. And so I teach people how to use that tachometer. But there's also another gauge I call the GPS on your dashboard. Because there are basically two roads on this. There's the road that has high pleasure and may even feel better for a little while, but there's a steep decline later down to even zero, maybe death. That's the addiction curve. So a lot of us look for the quick fix without looking down the road to see where it ends up. On the other hand, there's the one that has less pleasure and may even have less pleasure for a period of time. But the reason we do this is because we have a frontal lobe, the ability to look into the future. We can consider, where is this going? And while we're doing this, we can go ahead and enjoy this. That's the only way to get through it. you have to know that you're doing this for a reason. And the reason is, it's going to make me better. It's going to make my experience better. As a biblical scholar, I know the scripture that said Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him. He died, suffering, because he felt this while he was going through the pain and agony. And so, as you know, the mind of Christ is a wonderful thing to think about. How he did it is an example for us. He used his frontal lobe and his ability to look into the future just like we need to do today. And so that's your GPS you need to put on your dashboard as well, along with your tachometer. Now, as a neuroscientist, I know that the brain has lots of parts. A lot of science has gone into looking at parts, and they're separated based on function. Functional neural networks, like someone comes to me and has trouble paying attention. I look at their attention networks. Someone has memory problems. I look at memory networks. Someone has mood regulation problems. I look at mood regulation networks. And we train those. And we also have to look at what's called the connectome. How well is information flowing from place to place? And we can train that as well. We have attention networks that are very specific to the brain. And if you don't have a functional attention network, you can't pay attention. And there's another set of networks, like anxiety networks. The default mode network is very important. It's kind of like that terminate and stay resident software program. It's always running in the background. You might not be conscious of it, but that's where you're constantly telling your story to yourself. Who am I? Well, I'm broken, I'm pained, I'm traumatized. So to retell your story into a healing modality is part of the work for some people. Training yourself to tell a new story. But you have to break the habit of being yourself if you're going to do that. So many of us live by a memory of the past. But I help people learn to live by a vision of their future. And that's what free will is. You have the choice. You can let go of the old story and write yourself a new one. Write a new script. And it's worth the effort, but it does take effort. And there's network switching. Sometimes you have to have what's called the ability to focus convergently, narrow, and then divergently big. And you need to switch back and forth and be flexible. So I train flexibility sometimes just for such a thing. We use quantitative electroencephalography, which looks at all the different parts of the brain. We can divide the brain into 12,000 voxels, 3D pixels, calculate the current or electricity in each of those, compare it to a normative database, and show it to you in terms of whether you're getting better or worse 32 times a second, so that it bypasses your language. Language takes about a half a second to have a conscious thought. But we can train your biology. So somebody says, I just can't meditate. I can't tell myself another story. I'm just stuck. Well, let's just try training your biology. Train your stress hormones to go down directly. And training that way is often more effective than talk therapy. Now, back to Nassim Haramein and his unified physics. So what he's discovered, but he didn't discover it, he just elaborated on it and combined it with everything else we know. When you look closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, you get to the atom, and then you have subatomic particles. You've probably heard of protons and electrons, but inside the proton of every atom, there's a certain number of what are called Plancks, named after Maxwell Planck, the originator of quantum physics. Mm-hmm. These are not things that just sit there. They're called Planck oscillators because they're only there for 0.000000000000001 second. That's a Planck second. So they're blinking in and out of the singularity, the quantum field. So everything's at the same place at the same time, then they're all differentiated into the entire material universe at this high rate of fluctuation. And that's what's collapsing due to the observer effect. We're actually making matter in space and time by collapsing these subatomic particles by being observers. And what he's done is he's given us an idea of what we call a calculus of consciousness. So these little Plancks, they're the smallest unit of time, the smallest unit of space, the smallest unit of mass, and they also are conscious because they are accepting feedback. You know, a lot of scientists say we live in a random universe. There's no meaning, no purpose. Well, what happens when something explodes? It just goes to chaos, right? Well, what about the Big Bang? Since the Big Bang, has everything just gone to chaos? Doesn't look like that to me, does it? What's that? Yeah, something, yeah, order. And what's causing that order? There's a feedback loop. The universe is conscious, and we are part of that. The entire universe is conscious. And so when we start to do this kind of physics, we realize what we're doing is we're calculating consciousness. And we have, so Nassim Haramein has actually proven, his math has upgraded our estimation of the size of the universe by 10%. Everybody admits that. That's just known fact. But he's shown us that within every atom, there are a certain number of Plancks inside the proton. And it acts like a black hole. Every atom is like a tiny black hole in the proton. And there are the same number of Plancks in a proton as there are protons in the universe. The holistic principle. So it's like every proton, every piece of matter is like an entire universe. And the theory also confirms that there's probably the same thing going on inside every Planck. There's probably as many sub-Plancks within every Planck as there are Plancks in that proton. So there's this infinity in all directions. There's no stopping this universe getting smaller and getting larger and getting multi-dimensional. So this is peer-reviewed, validated research now that's giving us the power to have free energy. And so you think about the Planck oscillators. That's the fundamental frequency of everything. And on top of that frequency, we've got biological frequencies, which is a whole different scale. And then psychological frequencies, which is a whole different scale. And your brain has frequencies, but they have to somehow be harmonics of the Planck oscillators. And you feel it. You don't have to do the math. You have an instrument that's able to sense harmony. You're able to sense the feel of something you might call love, or joy, or peace, or harmony, or oneness, or wholeness. And so I believe that there's something we can call the grand unified theory of happiness. Grand unifying, because unified implies a finish. There's no finish here. It's the grand unifying theory of happiness that says that your individual happiness is equal to your unitive experience minus your fragmentive experience. So these oscillators are differentiating from the field, and they're returning back to the field at that high rate of speed. Now, differentiation is not bad, it's a good thing. If there is coherence, if they're differentiating and staying together in some kind of meaningful, conscious way, but when you have trauma, you're differentiating without coherence. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel healing. It doesn't feel hopeful or healthy or connected. It feels like you're falling apart. That's kind of what we say when we go to the psychologist or the psychiatrist. I'm coming apart at the seams. I'm falling apart. I'm having a breakdown. So that's trauma. And that's the way the world is run these days. We're running on trauma and stress hormones instead of unitive experience and health and healing hormones. So that's a simple thing. You have to habituate unitive experience. You have to have a lifestyle that turns off the stress hormones and turns on the health and healing and love and harmony hormones. And you feel that. So where are you going to go to find that? Well, anywhere that has community and love. We have families, we have churches, we have organizations, we have community, but you still have to look for it. You still have to make it a habit. And one of the things that I teach is I help people find ways to have unitive experience if they have a hard time doing that. So the brainwave primer here talks about the frequencies. Slow wave frequency, delta, when you're asleep, theta, when you're reflective, alpha, when you're resting and meditative. And then once you get into beta, that's when you turn on the stress hormones. So what you have to do is you have to have a lifestyle that turns back into alpha and theta to reset your programming. Whatever you do, you have to know how to do that voluntarily. It's a skill that you have to develop. If you're always in beta, then you're always in the hormones of stress, and you're always playing the keyboard of the genetic expression that will lead to disease if you don't stop playing that keyboard. I mean, it's okay. We react. Everybody has reaction, but you have to be like the zebra. Zebras don't get ulcers. They're constantly in danger of being eaten by lions, but they only get stressed when the lion is close. They run, and then they relax and sit back and they eat again. They don't worry about the lion being, that far away. So that's why zebras don't get ulcers, and we do. We're constantly worried. Oh no, there's a lion out there somewhere. I don't see it, I don't smell it, I don't hear it, but it's probably going to be here soon. So we live in a memory of the past rather than a vision of the future. And knowing your brain waves and knowing what to do about them is part of the solution. So we have different frequencies. We can measure it. Here's an example of someone who has low power. And you tell that person, just focus. Just get some energy. Well, we don't know they don't know how to do that. So we have to have methods. And so we've developed methods of stimulation. Electrical stimulation, magnetic stimulation. Medication is a chemical fix, but it tends to have a downside in that you become addicted to medications. And you can become addicted to thought in a positive way. So thinking truthfully and honestly and positively can be a positive addiction. It's something you do repeatedly, and you would have withdrawal if you stopped, but it's a positive addiction because it widens your world. It gives you more life and health and hope. Sometimes we have too much energy in our brains. We need to reduce it in order to get it into an optimal range. Coherence and reality is the most important thing. If you want to have a personal, coherent reality, then you have to find the meaning of your life and put it together into purpose and meaning. And it's going to be in community. No man is an island. So personal coherence always involves interpersonal coherence, community coherence, and the goal is global coherence. We want eventually for this entire human species to be loving and cooperative instead of competitive and win-lose. We've got to get to win-win. We've got to look at each of us as brothers and sisters. And that's going to take some growth and evolution on the species part. So you might ask, well, what can I do to habituate unitive experience and to turn on those growth and health and healing and creativity hormones? Well, learn to meditate. If a lot of people say, I can't meditate, I've tried. Well, that's probably true for some people. If you've had enough trauma, trying to meditate could just re-traumatize you. And that's a lot of people are that way. But what we want is a meditative mind. Meditation comes from the same root as medicine. So you want your mind to be in a healing state all the time. Even if you do have stress, you can see it within a context of healing, within a context of the entire field. The quantum field is a singularity, and you can continue to feel the oneness and the wholeness even when you're stressed out and doing something hard and difficult. We offer some very powerful techniques. We train the heart and the brain through biofeedback. We have rest, flotation rest, restricted environmental stimulation therapy, where you're actually turning down all the input. Sometimes we're just so sensorily overloaded that we need just to turn the volume down, the sight and sound and touch. And in a restricted environmental stimulation therapy chamber, you just get to relax, and that can be very powerful for a lot of people. Sometimes, like someone with a low power brain, they need some energy, so we can stimulate the brain. Specific networks can take in some energy, and it's like jump starting a car. It just runs better, or pushing a kid in a swing when they're sitting there and don't know how to go. They need a few pushes, and then they learn how to keep their legs swinging and arms swinging so they can power the swing by themselves. So pushing the brain with stimulation is very effective sometimes. And the body. When we have experiential trauma, the body keeps the score. And we have stored chemicals and stored trauma in the body itself. So frequency-specific microcurrent actually helps release and heal that energy with certain methods. Entheogenics. Entheogenic just means experiencing the God within. So traditional cultures, Native Americans, often use plant medicine for that. And those are becoming well researched, and we're on the cusp of making a lot of them legal so that they can be used to resolve trauma. Right now, ketamine is already legal. We do that in our office. And so we can have an entheogenic use of ketamine so that you can literally feel that unitive experience with the help of a drug. Not to addict you, but to just open your experience up to something you haven't been able to experience before. Now, we're actually working on a device that reads the brain and body in terms of frequencies, electromagnetic and photonic frequencies, and formulates a hypothesis about what might get that body and brain back into balance through stimulation, tests that hypothesis through stimulation, then reads again in a way that is faster than a human, but it's open source. It's going to be the democratization of health. It's free. Open source software. It's going to be AI assisted. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. That's an oxymoron. If it's truly intelligent, it's not artificial. It's natural. So we don't have to worry about AI. We just have to make sure that it's really intelligent and that's natural and healthy. But it's going to be able to personalize faster than a clinician can. So I do this already. Someone comes in, I do a brain map, I decide on a process, we train something, stimulate something, then ask them, over a period of time, are the symptoms getting better? And I look at the brain, is the brain looking better? But that takes days and weeks and months sometimes. An AI-assisted open BCI brain-computer interface could do this repetitively and test hypotheses in seconds, in minutes, so that it would be training you. Someone who says, I can't meditate, this would be a meditation trainer. So that you use the device, and then you go away, and you know what you feel like when you're in flow. You don't need the device anymore. It's like training wheels for the meditative state. And if anybody's interested in helping with this project, just come to me. So we at NeuroSource are dedicated to trying to help the human race survive and thrive in everything that we know to do. And we have fun doing it. I've been doing this for over 34 years now, and I have had so much fun helping people tune up their experience into flow and facilitate unitive experience. And if you would like any more information, please feel free. I'll put some cards out here. And any questions? Oh, that was a long one. Sorry. Questions, comments?
Can you purchase the ARC necklace?
Yes, yes. Go to spacefed.com, spacefed.com, and that's Nassim Haramein's main website now. He's got the Resonant Science Foundation, but that's an old website, but it's still open. You can learn about unified physics. He's got a free course. If you want to understand unified physics, he'll take you from the beginning all the way up through unified physics. And if you like math, you can even do the math part. I can't follow the math. But the concepts are clear as day, and the effects are measurable and quantifiable. So we're on the road. So envision free energy, no poverty, space, gravity drive, and the whole globe working together in peace and harmony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone wants a card?